I think this is just emboldening more men to do the same thing, because guess what they're going to do? They're going to get away with it. There are men in this industry who have left this country, who are now living on islands and in different countries, you know, to escape persecution from things like this. There are men that I know personally who are involved in this, who have done things similar to this, who have parties like this. Diddy's not the only one. This is not a Sean Combs problem. This is a societal community issue here in this town. And it's not just the artists, it's also their attorneys, their publicists. It's the whole—
Whatever, yada, yada, yada. Piers Morgan. Now, I don't care whether or not you like the young brother or you dislike the young brother. What you can't say is that he doesn't have an entertaining show. So I'm absolutely here for it. Now, shout out to the production team over at the Piers Morgan Uncensored show. What they do is that they bring people on the show with diametrically opposed opinions about trending topics and have them debate. Now, I don't know who the content genius is over there over at Piers Morgan Uncensored, but whoever this was went into the crypt and dug up the body, the soul of Corinne SuperHead Steffens to give her opinion on the Diddy situation. And I want to get active into this conversation, or the lack thereof of the conversation that they had, because there was a couple of things within their conversation that was interesting. And then I want to dovetail to the end of it, because you have Tony Busby, who is one of the litigators that has come at these high-ranking, high-status celebrities to sue them with a lot of people call frivolous lawsuits. I believe he had some lawsuits out in regards to Diddy. There was one drop from Jay-Z's camp not too long ago versus DJ Vlad, who recently has come against Cassie, saying on his public Twitter, hey, listen, if Diddy is guilty of transportation, then Cassie should be guilty of transportation as well, especially after we listened to the S workers essentially out her for not being the good girl that she supposedly was. Nevertheless, let's get into SuperHead, who's changed her name to Elizabeth. Let's get into her comments first. Now, Corinne's portion of this video is being heralded as boring, but again, key few parts I wanted to go over. Let's start with the introduction.
Censored, Elizabeth. Thank you very much indeed for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
A lot of people are kind of aware of your history with Diddy, but for those who know nothing about it, how would you categorize your time with him?
Look at, oh. Did she just bust a nut on live air? you brought her out of retirement for this, Piers. Let's listen. Oh. You all right?
My time with Sean was honestly pleasant in the beginning. To my recollection, the first time we met, we spent the night together, but he was a consummate gentleman with me in that evening, again, to my recollection.
Ooh.
And
when they blink and their eyes go up at the different time, there's never been a woman in the history of woman when they do that and they're like, okay, like, right, you know what I'm saying? Like, usually they're clinically insane, they have psychotic tendencies. I'm not a doctor. This is just MTR field studies.
Every other time I saw him after that was in a group setting, so it was fine. The last time I saw him, however, things had taken a bit of a turn. It was after Confessions of a Video Vixen, my first book had been published, and he was seething when he saw me at— Prince had a party at his house, and we were there, you know, of course, before Prince died, and he was scowling at me the whole night, and I found it amusing, but he was obviously very angry with me by that point in our relationship.
Whatever, yada, yada, yada. She is essentially, if you're unfamiliar with her, right, some of the Gen Zs may not know about her, all right? The Gen Ys and the Gen Xs knows what's up. She was essentially like an industry thought pass around, and she made a name for herself because she wrote a book after being a video vixen to like all of these famous people. So this book, at the time when it was released, was like one of the— I think I was in college at the time when it was released. It was like one of the biggest news story because all of these Hollywood people were going to be outed. She successfully utilized her femininity, her looks in order to extract money and power and status out of these men, translated into a book, and then voila, people are asking for interviews 20-something years later. But she goes on to say in her long-winded, faux philosophical tone of voice to say that Diddy was essentially feeling a type of way because Diddy thought that his name was going to be in the book, and then inevitably it wasn't. So then Diddy kind of left her alone. I'm going to fast forward because that takes literally like 10 minutes for her to go through. I'm going to fast forward to where Piers asked her, hey, did you ever get your cheeks cracked by Diddy?
Do you actually ever have any kind of sexual relationship at all then?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Did you actually have any kind of sexual relationship with Diddy at all?
No, Diddy and I did not. No, well, not to my knowledge.
So, what do you mean by that?
What?
Not to my knowledge. I don't. Honestly, I'm questioning a lot of things right now.
Well, you think
So not to my knowledge. No, I don't think anything right now. Just not to my knowledge, because honestly.
That's a very strange response.
Yeah.
To not remember whether you did or not.
Yeah, isn't it? It is.
Oh.
Yeah, it is. Because honestly, Piers, before I went through my text, again, I hadn't read Confessions in 20 years. I wrote it. It was painful to write. So I never wanted to re-traumatize myself and go through those years again. And think about this. I'm a middle-aged woman at this point. I don't want to go back into my 20s and see what happened. But in gathering information for this interview here, reading that passage again for the first time in 20 years, I questioned a lot of things, like, well, why was he so afraid? And why did he try to, make my boyfriend feel as if I wasn't trustworthy? And
do you think he took advantage of you when you were under the influence of alcohol and drugs?
Now, mind you, she just said a second ago that they went home together on the first night that they met. Diddy was a little bit alarmed when he found out that she was writing a book, but then inevitably when he saw his name wasn't in it, he was cool with it. And now after all of that, she's saying she don't remember? Huh? It's almost as if she's prepping for a future lawsuit. Anyway, let's keep going.
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. And
but do you fear that's
before.
the case now from everything you've read?
Honestly, yes. Given the context, now that I know, because again, I never knew any of these things about him before. So the things that I learned in the trial, I did not know. I never saw that side of him. I did not know. I never understood. And again, in 2005, when I published Confessions, it says I didn't understand why he was so fearful of me, because our time together was pleasant. And I was like, wait, what is he so afraid of? What does he not want me to tell? I didn't see anything at that point. At that point, I hadn't seen anything. At that point, we had, I thought, just a friendly, platonic night together. So I was confused then. And 20 years later, I'm confused now. So to my knowledge, I've never had sex with Sean Combs. We never had that kind of relationship.
Probably one of the worst confusing answers ever given on this platform before. She can't say yes or no. Her answer is, I can't remember. That is terrifying. Nevertheless, before we get to the Busby Vlad debate, I wanted to go through some additional comments of what she thinks about the entire case.
We've heard, let's say none of that was true. We saw something, however, that tells us something about this person. We saw a videotape of him brutalizing Cassie, and that tells me everything I need to know about this person's character. So even if nothing else was true, that alone is enough reason for him to be canceled indefinitely. But I fear that's not what's going to happen. I think this is just emboldening more men to do the same thing, because guess what they're going to do? They're going to get away with it. There are men in this industry who have left this country, who are now living on islands and in different countries, to escape persecution from things like this. There are men that I know personally who are involved in this, who have done things similar to this, who have parties like this. Diddy's not the only one. This is not a Sean Combs problem. This is a societal community issue here in this town. And it's not just the artists, it's also their attorneys, their publicists, it's the hotels. I was brutalized in a hotel, and guess what happened? That tape disappeared. When I went to get my police report from the police station, it was destroyed, all within 48 hours to protect the person who had brutalized me. It is systemic. So it doesn't matter, you know, if Diddy gets off or not, in the sense that it won't stop anything. I think if anything, it makes it all worse.
First off, cut the bullshit, Corinne. There's not a man on this planet that is looking at Diddy within his situation, what he's being accused of, and what he was entangled in that wants to be like Diddy. There's not a man on this planet that looks at what he did to Cassie on that boat and thinks to themselves, I should probably do this too. There's not a man on this damn planet. But what you speak from could be true, at least halfway true, that there's men up on top that are doing some Epstein Island type shit, and then the files just disappear, or the flight logs just disappear. That could happen. People in status with a lot of money can just make things just vanish. My issue with her stance is that she can blame the men, she can blame the hotels, she can blame the this, she can blame the that, but she is never once speaking about the blame of women like her and Cassie that will sign up for the bullshit. Because women like you and Cassie benefit from the lifestyle because you have an aesthetic and you lived out your roaring 20s to the best of your ability, and now you're extracting. And once you wanted a different lifestyle to be seen as something else outside of a video vixen, you played your chess piece. You participated willingly. Cassie participated willingly. And now a jury of her peers and all of the S workers that Diddy hired agree. Continuing to paint these women as victims who make this decision is ridiculous at best and hilarious at worst. Anyway, that's the SuperHead section. I want to get on to this argument between Tony Busby and DJ Vlad. Let's go.
I'm pretty clear what your view is of Cassie Ventura there. What do you think should happen to her?
I mean, personally, I think she should be charged with the same thing that Diddy was charged with. Ultimately, he was convicted of prostitution. She was involved in the prostitution. Every male escort that I talked to said that she was the one picking the actual male prostitutes. She would book them. She enjoyed every experience. She was sort of guiding the whole thing while they were together, and she was the one that actually paid them. Ultimately, this is a domestic violence case that's ballooned into a RICO and sex trafficking and so forth. What Diddy did to Cassie in that hallway was absolutely horrible.
It's abhorrent.
But that is not what the trial was about.
Right.
It was about RICO. It was about sex trafficking, neither of which made sense in this particular trial. And if you want to actually convict her for prostitution, Cassie is just as liable for that same prostitution that Diddy got convicted of, but she was given immunity in the whole situation. So I just feel it's really just a messed up situation.
That's a completely ridiculous stance, because you know what the consequences of her, not booking those prostitutes? We saw it in that hallway in the hotel, in an international chain hotel, that were happy to take $50,000 to wipe it off the face of the earth. Those are the consequences. If she hadn't done that, it is very likely that she would have been manhandled in that way, even in the street, and someone would have been able to wipe the footage of that. I appreciate the fact that she hold on.
Case, which has nothing to do with
I appreciate the fact that she
was not charged with domestic violence. You're talking about a totally different situation.
I guess the question.
So, in case folks don't know, the way that the defense fought that within the trial is that they said, hey, listen, she wasn't running out the room because she wanted to get away from the orgy that was happening inside of the room. She was getting out the room because she was jealous over Diddy. She saw something written on his phone, took his phone, did something to it, and tried to run off with it. Then he came out the room and did some DV stuff. Women like the one on the right twist the story to the way that they want it to have happened. Not that there's any other context or any other conclusion that can be drawn besides this is trafficking. Even when they hear all of the witness, even when they hear all of the S workers talking about, oh, no, Cassie used to invite me to go down to strip clubs with her. And then behind Diddy's back was letting me all up in her. That's what the S workers are saying. Cassie was getting her back flipped and rearranged without Diddy even knowing. That goes against the whole swinger lifestyle. That may cause some DV-ish. Vlad is talking about this is DV. She's talking about that this is trafficking. The footage does not prove that, and the S workers didn't prove that as well. That's why they didn't want those S workers to come up and speak on behalf of the prosecution, because they would paint Cassie in a much different light. Let's proceed.
I guess the question that Esther's posing there really is, did she go along so apparently consensually with all the freak-off stuff, with all these escorts, because she
admitted to that.
Well, hang on. My question is, did she go along with it in the apparently consensual way because she was in fear of retribution from Diddy in a way we saw with the beating?
No, I don't think so. At the end of the day, this was an artist that had one hit song 20-something years ago. She had the ability to leave at any point. She was signed to a label, but labels leave artists that don't react constantly. She could have went. She stayed because she wanted to be in that particular situation. Now, people are going to argue with me and so forth, but at the end of the day, she stayed because there was no one else that was offering her a record deal. There's no one else that was spending millions of dollars on her. There's no one else that was showering her with gifts. So she decided to stay. And ultimately, at the end of the day, when the money ran out, when she married a broke fitness trainer and had to go move back in with her parents, and the money completely ran out, then it's like, okay, let's sue Diddy and let's get $20 million out of him.
Damn.
That is my take on it. That's always been my take. That always will be my take.
Okay, Tony Busby, let me bring you in here. Okay. Just first off, what do we think is going to happen to Diddy here? What sentence are you anticipating?
I'm expecting 2 to 4 years, I would expect.
Yeah,
I mean, he's
that's
not
what I'm
going to
thinking.
he's not going to get 20 years, obviously.
Yeah.
He's already has time served. There's going to be some mitigating factors. He doesn't have a prior record. However, there are some issues within the case that might be reasons for the judge to go a little bit higher than perhaps normal. But I would expect 2 to 4 years. What
is your feeling? You've obviously represented many Diddy victims in civil actions. You had over 100 people come to you with various allegations. What impact does this verdict have on the suits that you want to proceed with?
Zero. I mean, I was listening to Vlad there for a minute, and I'm sure that same kind of argument took place in the jury room. I mean, people have a hard time putting their head around a situation where somebody might consent one day and not consent the next. And there are people in this world that believe, well, you've consented once, so therefore you're consenting for life. That is not what the law says, and I can understand why there may have been people on that jury that had the same point of view, and I'm not criticizing, I'm just saying that there's a lot of psychological issues here that people really don't understand about trauma bonding and how somebody might feel compelled to do something that they really don't want to do. But even if they said no one time, that is not consent. And I think in this trial, and we didn't have the benefit, or at least I didn't have the benefit of watching it day to day and seeing each witness and hearing how they said the things they said. All I was able to see was the transcript that I would receive on a daily basis. Obviously, the jury thought that the RICO situation was complete baloney. They thought, apparently, that this was not a RICO situation. There was no conspiracy, and they were trying to put a round peg into a square hole or vice versa. I did think that, given the testimony that I saw, that there were instances where Cassie and Jane were forced to do things either through financial pressure or through extortion type pressure or through force, things that they did not want to do.
But the interesting thing on that, Tony, is that the jury clearly did not believe either woman when it came to any issue about consensuality. Yeah. They just didn't believe any of it. I think pretty much across the board.
They believe it was a transaction.
It was clear they had not bought in to the suggestion that any of this was non-consensual.
No question. I mean, I think you're right. And sometimes juries do things that we don't expect. I go back to whether, each instance that this happened, did he have consent each time? Then I see Vlad's point. There were times when it looked like that Cassie was involved in setting some of these events.
There's no question.
What do you mean looks like? There's no question.
The Punisher, the guy who gave evidence, he gave very powerful, eloquent evidence. And I've interviewed him several times. He's a very good talker, and he had no real kind of skin in the game. In fact, he was brought from the prosecution to give evidence, but actually ended up being a pretty powerful witness for the defense, it turned out, because what he said was everything was done through Cassie Ventura and seemed very consensual. Went on for over 2 years, a dozen or so encounters in hotels where Diddy just sat in the corner saying nothing. She booked him, she paid him, she organized it. Everything was driven by her. She seemed to have a good time. Everyone was happy. I thought that was very powerful evidence, actually, for Diddy, because it seemed to contradict everything that they were trying to position it as, which was this was all coercion.
Right. And also notice that they never tapped into the S worker that was in the actual hotel room when we got the footage. Why didn't you just ask him? What was the argument about? Now, Piers is damn right. They had all of these damn different S workers and they only had one come up to the stand. And that one was saying there was no drugs. It was consensual. And in fact, it seemed like they were having a good time. The Punisher also said that he was invited by Cassie one time, and he said that he couldn't go because he was at Six Flags. And then Cassie was like, well, can you just bring someone else? What? Like, how easy it for you to take unknown schlong or eggplant from new men that you've never even met before. But that's how she is. That don't sound like force. That sounds like being an avid fan.
Let me offer this up. You know, the government settled in on using 2 alleged victims. They used Cassie and they used Jane. Early on, when this all started, we were contacted by the U.S. Attorney, and they asked us, can we speak to some of your clients? So we went to, and they told us, these are the ones we want to speak to. We made those people available. They talked to a couple of those people. But I think by that point, they had decided, their team had decided that they had what they needed. They had the goods, if you will, to proceed with Jane and with Cassie. I think that was a mistake. I will say, as I watched the trial, or at least learned about the trial daily as it went on, I thought the government was doing what they needed to do to get a conviction. Obviously, that wasn't the case. Obviously, they did not believe that they believed that Diddy had consent, and they didn't believe there was a conspiracy. And obviously, the transportation to commit prostitution, that was pretty cut and dried. And I think everybody, no matter which side you fall out on, believed that there would be a conviction there.
But there is a point, isn't there, that which Vlad made, I thought, pretty compellingly.
Cassie
if
should
you're
be
going to
charged.
convict Diddy and you don't believe that it was non-consensual and Cassie did all the booking, why is she not being charged? And could it be that the reason that she turned on Diddy was to preempt potentially some legal exposure herself?
Who knows? We'll never know that. They gave her immunity early on, and they that's the horse they rode with, and we see what happened.
Well, I don't think it's that cut and dry. I think consent without fear of consequences is not, with fear of consequences, is not actually consent. So if you were going against Cassie, for example, you're going to try her, all she has to do is show you that video and just say, look at what happens if I didn't do that. Now, I don't think it reached the threshold for the jury for RICO, which I completely understand. Like I said, a conspiracy that involves one is a thought. But this is why I say this is not a problem for the courts. It's a problem for culture and society. Cassie met P. Diddy when she was 17 years old. She signed a 10-album deal with P. Diddy by the age of like 20 or 21, which is virtually unheard of in this industry. I mean, I'm sorry, she wasn't Beethoven. She didn't have the kind of talent that would warrant that kind of record deal. She was clearly groomed. Now, amongst all of that, could you say she could have got up and left? Okay, arguably, yes.
She was with him 10 years.
To go from 10-album deal to she was clearly groomed. Yo, the hoops that you must jump through in order to get there is logically insane. Like, it's just crazy. It's crazy.
Yes, but the thing is, he has
Wait,
to
what?
say she could have got up and left. Okay, arguably, yes.
She was with him
but
10 years.
Yes,
Right.
But the thing is,
She was in a relationship.
And the Punisher was very clear.
Yes,
She
but he
did
paid
not
her
give
rent.
any impression to him of being anything but a very enthusiastic and willing participant.
Right.
in
Yeah,
some
but
quite
it's
kinky
nuanced.
stuff.
Shut up. Grooming denotes PDF file. It denotes children. They were in a 10-year relationship. Listen, again, I think Diddy's a piece of shit. Let me just say that real quick, because I don't think I said that yet in the video. But if you guys are accusing him of something, such as grooming, you have to be able to demonstrate it. It can't just be a feeling. You have to be able to demonstrate it. And even the S workers who are complicit in crimes as well are saying, no, it didn't appear like that. It actually appeared as though Cassie was thoroughly enjoying all of our members side of her, deep, long, and often. Let's go.
What happened when she tried to break up with him and date, what's his name?
Kid
The
Cudi?
rapper, who had his car blown up. I mean, it's not that cut and dry. This, I feel like Cassie.
But Esther, we have lots of chats through the Me Too era and stuff, and obviously one of the things people are saying about this is that, in a way, it signals the beginning of the end of that Me Too movement, because for a long time, everyone was encouraged to believe women accusers. The moment they made allegations, they had to be believed. That was always, to me, a very dangerous proposition.
Come on.
It should always be they should be taken seriously. the allegations should be investigated properly, and then decisions should be made about whether there had been a crime. Very dangerous to believe accusers before you actually know whether they're telling the truth. But here we've got a situation, I think, where if he'd been in this case 3-4 years ago, he would have gone down.
Yeah, I don't think.
I think the jury, I suspect, has moved with the times.
I think the whole Me Too issue was a separate kind of beast. P. Diddy and the environment that he exists in, the hip hop industry, is a completely different kind of sleaze. And also, it was very cut and dry from that video.
Is it though? Is it any different to Harvey Weinstein, who claimed that a lot of what his stuff was transactional?
She's reaching.
I mean, he was convicted of rape and sexual abuse and so on. So obviously, again, juries didn't agree. But he painted a picture of a lot of kind of transactional relationships with people, right, where he believed this was all part of the sort of casting couch deal. That again has been, that's dinosaur stuff and was outrageous and wrong and everything else, and it turned out to be criminal as well. But I don't think there's much difference in the attitude.
There is a difference. I think hip hop has always come under fire for being quite sleazy. I mean, you can't listen to a hip hop track from 20 years ago without hearing the N-word or bitch. It's always been quite sleazy. They've always been quite actually vocal about the fact that they treat women like pieces of meat. And the women, a lot of the time, are happy to be treated that way because they get a lot from it.
So that's interesting, isn't it, Vlad? Because that is part of that hip hop culture. There's no doubt. A lot of women have embraced that kind of, very misogynist language, the lyrics and so on and so on. Is your feeling about what happened here with Cassie Ventura and Diddy that she was, notwithstanding the violence which would erupt more than once, we know there were other occasions when he was violent to her, that she enjoyed her life around this superstar rapper, notwithstanding that?
I don't understand.
That's an odd question, Piers.
Well, that she accepted the violence and was prepared to stay in the relationship because she enjoyed everything else.
Yeah.
I think there was a very violent relationship. I think it was a drug-fueled relationship. I think there was lots of money and fame and jet-setting involved. At the end of the day, I think what happened to her was horrible. I think that tape showed just how bad the domestic violence was. But at the end of the day, this is not what the trial was about. Mm-hmm. The trial was about RICO. The trial was about trafficking. The trial was about prostitution. In fact, the only reason Diddy got convicted was because it was interstate commerce. All the other male escorts that I've talked to, like, for example, I talked to Don the dealer, who also had multiple sessions with Cassie. She said she was loving it. She was into it. She was setting the direction. At the end of the day, you could stay in a bad relationship, but you decide to stay in that bad relationship. This is really about the domestic violence, but the domestic violence goes back past the statute of limitations. So if you think about it, in this whole case, all the escorts I talked to were not, sent to a different state or a different country. They were all local. Like Don the dealer was in Miami. Punisher was in New York. If all these guys didn't travel across state lines, there would be no case at all. None whatsoever. Yeah. And with Tony Busby, at the end of the day, like he said, that the feds talked to multiple people that he's representing that were suing, but they decided not to use any of them, which makes me think that there wasn't any real credible, real evidence that they actually did anything wrong in the whole situation. Therefore, there's only two people that were actually used. The only person that was actually that filed a lawsuit that was used in this case was Cassie. Yeah. And there's over 100 lawsuits. So what does that say? That says the lawsuits are all nonsense.
I listened to you.
I'm wrong?
And some of
which of your clients was used in this case?
Let's be clear about something.
Which of your clients was used in this case?
Hey, listen very carefully. If the alleged assault happened in LA, there was nobody flown in, there was nobody coerced and trafficked across state lines, they wouldn't use the client, obviously. These cases that we have filed in New York are filed under a New York statute for sexual assault and sexual abuse. That's completely different than transportation for prostitution or for sexual trafficking, and certainly has nothing to do with RICO. So you just made this grand conclusion that, the U.S. attorney talked to a few of these folks and decided they had no credibility. You are flat out wrong in that respect, because
none of them were used. None of them were used. How am I wrong if none of them were used?
Decided is that there was nothing that happened across state lines, and there was no trafficking, which is what the case was all about.
Yeah, no.
So it has nothing to do with whether these.
To be honest, this attorney right here, it is my opinion that he should be disbarred. It's actually ridiculous, the degree of fantastic points that Vlad is making. If you have a case on RICO and you currently have 100 other cases that are trying to say, you got some cases that are saying Diddy was murdering people, and that he went and contacted the police department, and then they went back and they wrote down the case incorrectly, so the news reported it different way. That sounds more like RICO. But when the federal government had the opportunity of RICO, they couldn't even get it on that. When you have all of this other case, all of this other evidence, all of these other, they couldn't contact none of them. I think that they did. And then after investigating, they found many of them not credible. It is my opinion, and I'm saying my opinion specifically, my opinion that the Busby gentleman doesn't care the legitimacy of the people that are coming to him. Seems like if you have a case against extremely wealthy people, he's willing to try it for you. I don't know the amount of people that come to him for cases versus his acceptance rate. That's why I'm saying it's my opinion. But to not acknowledge that fantastic point made by DJ Vlad, I think is incredible.
People were credible or not. Their case is a civil case alleging state law claims of assault after being drugged. That was not the case.
That'd be fantastic
that was brought by the
for
US
RICO.
attorney, and frankly, that's not a case that could be brought by the U.S. attorney, and which is the point that
or trafficking.
Jay-Z and Diddy of her when she was 13, and we all saw it was all nonsense. It was absolutely false. It was absolutely false. She said Good Charlotte was there. They weren't there. She was 13 years old. Her own father said it was all nonsense. Jay-Z sued you over that. Come on. Like you have a long history.
Give you a little bit of information.
A long history.
Make all these broad.
A long history.
Oh, this is good.
Know what you're talking about.
Have you won a single lawsuit with any of these people you've represented? A single lawsuit.
Literally 30 days ago for $640 million, pal. So don't be telling me about winning lawsuits.
With Diddy?
More lawsuits than any lawyer in the United States. So I don't hear
with Jay-Z. How many lawsuits have you won against Diddy and Jay-Z? How many lawsuits have you won against Diddy and Jay-Z?
None have went to trial yet, knucklehead. Think about it. They don't just file a case, go to trial. Wait and see.
You won nothing.
Okay, let me just jump. All right, look, the reality is we're going to find out.
All right, guys, I'm going to pause the content right here. But damn, that was a throwdown towards the end right there. Guys, do me a solid and drop me your comments down below in the comment box. I want to know what you guys think about the points that were stated throughout this debate, and as well as my thoughts as well. Add a timestamp down up in there so I know exactly which component of the content you were speaking about. Everything from the SuperHead-ish to the battle between Busby and Vlad. I want to be able to hear your guys' thoughts, and I will see you guys soon. Until next time, YouTube, peace. That was for the 1-2, you heard? It's been a minute since I did that. I just felt the spirit, you know what I mean? All right, guys, peace.
You don't wanna see me get vexed. Bars on your phone, tell a man you can't jack. The big guy, the ones who can't stretch. Breaking the neck when we in the car next. You don't wanna see me get vexed. Bars on your phone, tell a man you can't jack. The big guy, the ones who can't stretch. Breaking the neck when we in the car next. That bars need a fibrillation ASAP. Get boxed with a straight guy. I'm reminded of mind state they lack. Every time that they climb, we go way back. All they wanna be is just